long things, right? Because it's scary to step into the next stage of existence. Okay. Okay, we're going to go on. We're going to go on and do a few more texts. And, oh, thank you, Grace. And here we go. So let's pay close attention now to how Moshe tells the story. And then we're going to compare it to what he's telling about, which occurs in Exodus and Numbers. Okay, so you get the project here. So think while we read this book of Devarim, this passage of Devarim, what's the difference? What are you hearing? What are you not hearing? And we'll look at it, but I just want to hear like your impressions. Okay, so Asher Chaim, I've done a lot of talking. Can I turn it over to you?
Only the reading part, Rav. Re'eh, natati lit. I'm sorry?
I'd love to hear your teaching as well.
Re'eh, natati lifnechem et haaretz. Bo'u urshu et haaretz, asher nishba' Adonai l'avotechem le'Avraham le'Yitzchak u'Yaakov latet lahem u'zar'am acharehem. Look, I have given in your presence the land. Come on, inherit the land which Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh swore to your ancestors, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, to give it to them and to their offspring after them. Va'omar aleichem ba'et hahi le'mor la'uchal levadi se'et etchem. While I said about you, to you at that point, saying, I can no longer carry you by myself.
Okay, so let's stop there for a minute. So already, there's a trope emerging. So Moshe actually said this to God. I can't bear the burden of the people anymore. We'll see that in Numbers. And also Jethro said it to Moshe, right? So, but Moshe is saying, I said it to you, right? I said it to you. And the way that Moshe tells the story again and again is, I said it to you. So he's trying to forge some kind of relationship to the people, right? Maybe it's their relationship, maybe it's a teacher yelling at their students. I have no idea, but there's a lot of you here. There's another thing, and we'll see this again and again. I should have bolded with Vadi. Aloneness is all over this. It's all over these texts, and it's in Lamentations too, right? It's in Lamentations. So it's like it's this whole I can't do it alone. Again, I talked about this last night. I can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. It's too much. I don't know how to do this. And you can just hear Moshe's anguish as a leader here, and it's even more poignant in the book of Numbers, which we'll get to. Okay, go on.
Adonai Elohechem hirba etchem, v'hinechem hayom kechochvei hashamayim larov. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, your God, has increased you, and behold, you are today as numerous as the stars of the heaven.
So the promise has been fulfilled, right? God promised to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob, you'll be as numerous as the stars in the sky. And they're as numerous as the stars in the sky. It happened. Wow. Right? So again, Moshe's trying to impart, like, you're part of this grand story. Right? You're the promise fulfilled.
Adonai Elohei avotechem Yosef aleichem kachem 1000 pa'amim v'yivarech etchem ka'asher diber lachem. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, God of your ancestors, will increase you another 1,000-fold and bless you as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to you. Keep going.
Yes.
Echa esa levadi karchechem u'masa'echem v'rivchem. How can I all alone bear all of your trouble and your burden and your fetching?
Right. So I call it the bother, the burden, and the bickering, and it's also the blessing, as my Chavruta pointed out this morning, Rabbi Sharon, in verse 11. So the blessing, the bother, the burden, and the bickering. It's like that whole package, right? And how can he bear that? How can he bear that burden? It's just too big. Okay, so let's look at Echa. If you could read that, you can do it in trope, you can do it in reading.
Echa ישבה ודד, העיר רבתי עם הייתה כאלמנה, רבתי וגויים, שרתי במדינות הייתה למס. How is it that the city that was filled with people now sits alone and has become like a widow? The one who was so great among the nations, who was a princess among the cities, is now, what is a thrall?
So I just looked that up. That's really interesting. So it plays off on, well, thrall, it's like enthralled, and historically it means slave, right? Lamas, I think has something to do with taxes, like
tax.
well, mas is tax, but if the princess becomes something to do with tax, she's sort of a forced laborer. That's what's happening here.
Vassal.
Nice. Vassal. So a thrall is like a vassal.
What city?
Oh, Jerusalem. So Lamentations is about the destruction of Jerusalem and the abandonment of
And
Jerusalem.
who was in Jerusalem before that? But it was great one nation before.
Oh, she is Zion, is the Jewish people.
But the Jewish people hadn't gotten there yet.
This is after. This is.
Sorry,
Destruction.
Alina, this is the
Okay.
book of Lamentations. This is way after. This is the book we read tonight on Tisha B'Av and tomorrow on Tisha B'Av on the night of Av. And it's one of the scrolls, and it happens way after the book of Dvarim, or the 5 books of the Bible, right? And it's a lament over the destruction of the first temple.
Is it written between the two or after the second?
After the second.
It's written after
I
this.
think.
Really?
I'm not sure.
Oh, no, it's
I
after
think
the
it's
first. Is
after
it
the
written
first.
by
It's after the
Jeremiah?
first. Yeah, it's written by Jeremiah.
Yeah,
It's after the first. Yeah, so the Talmud is written after the second.
And this was already there, yeah.
Mishnah is written after that. Okay, so let me stop my share. I don't know if there are comments in the room or on Zoom. Given anything we've said, see any comments on Zoom at this moment? Okay, Harley.
So, adding on to the story, and that's in a different voice. When I think about Dvarim, for me, the voices of the time when it was written, which would be way after this, which was by King Josiah. So, and it was written for a period. It was written to the community in Jerusalem and in Judea who had forgotten what they were, who they were. And this is a reminder of saying, this is where you come from.
Yes, so the time that it was written reflects the project that Moshe has, or Moshe is described as having in the book of Deuteronomy.
Right, and the challenge is, how do you take a people who's so far removed from the time of when this was written and of the settlements, to remind them, these are the people from whom you come.
Nice. And it also reminds me, of American Jewry and the whole question of peoplehood. Like, do we feel connected to peoplehood? Do we feel like a we? Right? And, that's a real challenge, especially in liberal Judaism. It's a challenge if you think we should identify as people. If you don't think we should, then it's not a challenge, right? Okay, Jay has his hand up. Jay Brodbar from Toronto.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom. I hesitate to blow my chance this early, but I don't want to get too far from the beginning, because I think there's a really interesting echo, and I don't know if others have pointed this out in the literature, with the beginning of Shemot in 2 ways. First of all, we have Pharaoh, who knew not Jacob and got totally overwhelmed and threatened by how numerous the Israelites were. Similarly here, Moshe feels he can't cope anymore with the burden because the Israelites are so numerous. So that's one interesting parallel. The other is, this is the Pharaoh who knew not Yaakov, and this was the transition from Bnei Yaakov to Bnei Israel, because he points to this family now as the start of a nation being so numerous. So now they're Bnei Israel, and here they're going away from Bnei Israel to Israel. So some interesting sort of transitions.
Love it, Jay. Never thought of that. And it's so interesting to think about, when does your blessing turn into someone else's curse? Right? So for the Israelites, they were multiplying, and that's a fulfillment of the blessing. And for Pharaoh, it was a curse.
Well, for Moshe, it was a bit of a curse too, in a way.
For Moshe, it was a mixed blessing to see.
Blessing, there you go.
At least, yeah, it was a bit of a curse. It was a burden. It was a burden and a blessing. Yeah, absolutely. And we often, those of us who are parents often feel that with children. It's a burden, and it's a huge burden, right? It can be it can be a wonderful experience. It can be a nightmare. It can be both at once. It could be a lot of things, right? Depending on one's situation. But I don't know any parents who've never felt burdened at some moment or another. Okay, Beth.
Shabbat shalom. Just like Jay, I hate to blow my chance so early, but I love what Jay just said. Asherheim, great intertext. I totally agree. And I think it's kind of cute if you go through history. Pharaoh couldn't herd the cats. Moshe couldn't herd the cats. And who's herding the cats today? Just saying.
Too many people are hurting the cats, or nobody is hurting the cats. I have no idea. Great question. Paul.
Shalom.
Okay, do people on Zoom hear the people in the room? Good. Okay, Paul.
To me, what is hurting the cats is culture. And what is surprising to me in this early part of Devarim is the continued surprise, I suppose, by Moses, and perhaps also by God, that of course, it wasn't going to take 11 days. It had to take 40 years. The only way that the children of Israel could become Israel is through the
crucible of the wilderness.
Crucible of the wilderness.
Yeah,
and
nice.
It's surprising to me that process is not acknowledged immediately as this book opens. Even so much, in addition, if it was in fact created 700 years later, where
I'm
there
not
should
sure
have
that
been.
the first verses express surprise or judgment or anything. They say it's an 11-day journey, and then they say, and it took this much time.
Yes.
Right? So it's not surprise, it's just a description.
The lack of statement of surprise,
I see.
to me, connotes a lack of awareness of what the process needed to be right in order to get to this place.
Yeah. I mean, my sense of the Torah is that it says less rather than more, and it's for us to make those connections, as you're doing right now. Okay. I think people are ready for more text. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Sharing my screen. And again, I just want to say, thank you to Asher Chaim for that beautiful reading of Echa. A little taste of what's coming tonight, but it's Shabbat, so we don't want to breathe too much. It's amazing how this lines up with the Parsha of Dvarim. And again, we'll see, this theme of loneliness will occur, or aloneness will occur in almost every text that we're going to look at today. So, okay, so I just wanted to give us a little statement from Genesis, just to remind us that aloneness is an issue, right? On one hand, Moshe spends 40 days up on the mountain twice alone, and that seems to be good. That seems to be necessary. On the other hand, facing a burden alone is clearly not good. And we'll see more about that in the following text. And it says in Genesis, lo tov heyot ha'adam levado. It is not good for the human to be alone. Lo ezer kenegdo. I will make a fitting counterpart for him. So this is where Adam has already been created, and God will then bring animals to Adam, and Adam will say, no, not this, not this, not this. And then finally, God brings Chava, brings Eve to Adam, and yes, this is my counterpart, right? So, but there's this fundamental statement about being human. It's not good to be alone. So, and it's for each of us to decide when it's good to be alone and when it's not. But if you feel fundamentally alone in your life, that can be a huge problem. Yes, Alan.
But it does acknowledge again mixed blessing, because Ezer Kenegdo is a counterpart, is somebody who challenges you and
Nice. Nice.
I was wondering, because it's often translated as help.
So Ezer
So
Kenegdo, it's a help. A Kenegdo could mean opposite or could mean against. So, and you know, those of you who are in relationships or have been in a relationship, it's like, it can be a help and it can be, a huge challenge or a huge like series of confrontations. It could be a nightmare.
So then
It could be all of that.
it's also something about mixed blessing.
It's a mixed blessing. And one of the things I love about the Torah is it's complicated. It doesn't make things simple. And even this, it's not good for people to be on. Yeah. It's like, I'm going to provide someone to be against you. Oh, lovely. Right? Thanks a lot. But it's an amazingly powerful mirror, the Torah, of what human existence is in a context, including violence and all kinds of other harms. Okay. Moving right along. Okay, so now let's see what happens here. So what I want to do is compare what Moshe says. So Moshe here says, I said to you, right? Omar elechem ba'et, in that time, lo uchal levadi se'et echem. I can't carry you alone. So this is based actually on two stories, and Moshe tells it differently than both of those stories. Okay, so keep this in mind. So here's the Jethro rendition. Ashokay.
ויהי ממחרת, וישב משה לשפוט את העם, ויעמוד העם על משה מן הבוקר עד הערב. And the next morning, Moshe sat to dispense justice to the people, and the people stood in line for Moshe from morning through evening. וירחותן משה את כל אשר הוא עושה לעם, ויאמר מה הדבר הזה אשר אתה עושה לעם? מדוע אתה יושב לבדך וכל העם ניצב עליך מן הבוקר עד הערב? Moshe's father-in-law saw all that he was doing to these people, and he said, what are you thinking? What are you doing to these people? Why do you sit all by yourself and the entire nation has to stand over you from morning till evening?
Okay, so this is amazing. So first of all, who's saying that you can't do this alone? It's Jethro, right? It's not Moshe who said it, at least in this part of the story. That's number one. And number two, I love that Jethro says, what are you doing to these people by acting like you're a solitary operator? What are you doing to them? Right? You're making them suffer, not that you're making yourself suffer. It's fascinating, and it's true. First of all, at the least, they're waiting on long lines. That's a problem as it is. And second of all, you can't get to everybody. It's a form, operating like you're a solitary operator, it's a form of abandonment. Because you can't really minister to a whole community without delegating. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
That's why it took 40 years.
IMHO. And that's why it took 40 years, because they were waiting online. I'll never forget when I was much younger, I think one of my first times to Israel, I was with my friend who actually moved to Israel, and we went to take a bus, and I got online, and I said, "What?" And she said to me, "Like, what are you doing?" I said, "Wait online." She goes, "What are you kidding? This is Israel. There's no line." I thought there was a line. Right? She goes, "Just get on the bus." Yeah, I'm too shy to be an Israeli, basically. Okay, let's go on.
Sorry. ויאמר משה לחותנו, כי יבוא אלי העם לדרוש אלוהים, כי יהיה להם דבר בא אלי ושפטתי בין איש ובין רעהו, והודעתי את חוקי האלוהים ואת תורתיו. Moshe said to his father-in-law, when people come to me to inquire of God because they have some issue, they come to me and I judge between one and his neighbor, and I make known to them the laws of Elohim and the Torah of Elohim. Vayomer hoten Moshe elav lo tov hadavar asher ata oseh. Father-in-law of Moshe said to him, not good this thing that you are doing.
So it's interesting because for me, it resonates with lo tov liot adam levado, right? So it resonates with it's not good for a person to be a human being to be lonely, because we have the alone here in Jethro's voice, and then we have the lo tov, the not good here in Jethro's voice, right? So Jethro knows like the fundamental Torah principle that it's not good for a human being to be alone, but Moshe doesn't seem to know it, right? Moshe's kind of a blind leader at this point. What?
He's doing.
He's doing the Pharaoh way, right? Pharaoh is like the isolated, the leader isolated in all his glory. Yes, absolutely.
Navol tibol gam ata gam ha'am hazeh asher imach, ki chaved mimacha hadavar lo tuchal asohu levadecha. You will surely wear out, you and these people. As our Rebbe said, those who don't break, break. All these people with you, ki chaved mimcha hadavar. This is the resonance. It's too heavy for you. Lo tuchal asohu levadecha. You can't do it all by yourself.
So this is the resonance with Dvarim, with what Moses is saying in Dvarim. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Should I keep going?
Yeah.
Ata shma b'koli i'atzecha v'hi Elohim imach. Heye ata la'am mul ha'Elohim, heveta ata et hadvarim el ha'Elohim. Now, read my lips. I'll give you some good advice, and may God be with you. You be representing the people to Elohim. You will bring their issues to Elohim. V'hizharta ethem et hachokim ve'et hatorot ve'hoda'ata lahem et haderech yelchu bach ve'et ha'ma'aseh asher ya'asun. You will warn them about the laws and statutes and Torah. You will make known to them the path they should walk on, the things that they should do. V'ata tehezeh mikol ha'am anshe hayil yir'ei Elohim anshe emet son'ei batza. V'samta alehem sarei alafim, sarei me'ot, sarei hamishim, v'sarei asarot. Bureaucratize. Look and find from among the people glorious, God-fearing men of truth who hate perverse bribery, whatever, and place those guys over them as officers of thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens.
Okay, good. So I think we get the picture, and let them judge the people at all times, and anything major will be creeped up to Moshe, right? So, but the way that Moshe represents the story, retells the story, if we go backwards for a second, is I said to God, I can't carry you by myself, right? Instead of Jethro, help me. And I know Nehemiah, who's here, is a big Jethro fan, right? Jethro is like a spiritual teacher from Moshe. And you can see from his language why he would be. He understands something very deep and very practical about how the world works and what leadership is all about. This is a great leadership manual. It's even a great parenting manual. Right? You can't do it all by yourself. You can't. It takes a community. Okay, so now let's look at the other story that this is based on in Bamidbar. So it resonates from both these stories, the Jethro story in Exodus and the story in Numbers. Okay, so we're going to skip part of this. So what's happening, the background is basically the people want meat, they're sick of the manna, and God says, and God's very, very angry, and the people are crying, they're hysterical, and part of that trope, part of a series of long complaints, or a long series of complaints. And here, I'll read a little bit starting in verse 11, we're in source 6. V'yomer Moshe el Adonai, Lama hare ota la'adecha ולמה לא מצאתי חן בעיניך לשום את מסע כל העם הזה עליי. And Moses said to Adonai, why have you dealt ill with your servant? Why have I not enjoyed your favor? That you have laid the burden of all this people upon me. So Moshe's addressing God. Moshe's not addressing the people. So again, you see what Moshe or what Deuteronomy does with the story, something entirely different. And then he says something, I actually love this passage. Hanochi hariti kol ha'am hazeh im anochi yoditihu ki tomar elai sa'ehu b'chekecha kasher yisa ha'omen et hayonek ha'adama asher nishbata la'avotav. Did I produce all these people? Did I engender them? It's actually, did I give birth to them? Hariti. Was I pregnant with them? And you should say to me, you meaning God, carry them in your bosom as a caregiver carries an infant, the land that you have promised an oath to their father. So Moses is basically saying, did I give birth to this people? No, God, you did. Right? This is one of these backwards sort of representations of God that's entirely female, right? It's a pregnant woman, right? Carry them in your bosom as a caregiver carries an infant. I talked about this a little bit last night, but right? The way that a caregiver carries a child or an infant, but the word omen, caregiver here, or breastfeeder, is actually the word that forms the word for faith, emunah.
Wow.
I know, isn't that intense?
Yeah.
You were there last night.
Yeah.
The word for faith is a word for
Your draw such
caregiver.
in a great way.
Okay, good. Yes. Alina, were you gonna say something?
The word for faith is a word for caregiver. in the sense.
Yeah. Or
Same
mothering
roots. The same
or
roots.
suckling, and also the word amen is connected to emunah, right?
Ah,
Okay, so now, okay, I think we did what we need to do here, except for, okay, this is amazing, okay? Verse 14, I'm skipping a bit. Lo uchal anochi levadi laset ekol ha'am hazeh ki kaved mimeni. I can't carry this nation by myself. Again, that word alone. I can't do it by myself because it's too heavy for me. I mean, again, I think, we've all felt that way about life at times. I can't do this. It's too heavy. It's too much. I can't possibly do this. And I feel alone in this, right? And it's very human and very profound. And it really humanizes Moshe. Then his next line is wild. V'im kacha ad oseli. And if this is what you do to me, hargeni na harog imatzatechem beina. If this is what you're going to do to me, kill me now if I've found favor in your eyes. Kill me now. I want to die. Which reminds me of Jonah, who also wanted to die because God took his carriage or whatever that was away. The al er'ah biratin, don't let me, see any more of my evil, my badness. Kill me now. I can't stand it. Yeah, Mark. By the way, I just want to tell people on Zoom, if you're in the room, you get to speak more than once. It's a perk of coming in person.
Right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in Exodus, this comes up.
Yeah.
And it's Jethro
Yeah.
who says, do this. But he also says, as God told you to do.
Yes.
But we don't get that in Exodus. But we get it in Numbers, which comes after.
Yeah.
And Jethro isn't mentioned. And I'm just wondering about all of that.
Wait, you're saying in Deuteronomy, Jethro is not mentioned?
No, so it says, let's see. Or I guess it's in Deuteronomy that when it comes up, what we just read from.
We just read from Numbers just now.
Numbers just now, it's
This one is not about, okay, let me just clarify.
Yeah.
So this text in Numbers has nothing to do with what happened in Jethro. Right, Jethro is about delegation. Here it's about the meat, and Moshe can't stand the burden anymore.
yes,
But what he's saying in Deuteronomy feels like a resonance of both.
But he also says, gather all these elders and bring.
Oh, that's true. That is absolutely true.
And I'll put
Yes.
the spirit upon them.
Yes, so there is a delegation here that comes from God.
Right.
Yes, correct.
And that's what Jethro seemed to be referring to.
Yes. Well, no, he's not referring to it because it comes earlier.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
but-
it's as
but
though
when
Moses
it
forgot
says-
about
when it says, Jethro says, as God told you to do.
I see. So you're saying basically, there is no earlier or later in the
Yeah, I
Torah.
guess so,
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
it's
Yeah,
not-
there's a weird conflation.
Yes.
But here it's not about adjudicating cases.
Yes.
Here it's about sharing the spirit with these other people, so Moshe's not there anymore. Right? It's not in a legal context. So it is different,
Okay.
even though it's still about delegating.
Okay.
And then there's a whole story, which I also love, about Eldad and Medad, who is like the two people from the 70 that kept the spirit and kept prophesizing. And Joshua runs over to Moses saying, oh my God, Eldad and Medad are still prophesizing. Like, you got to stop them. And Moshe's like, no, I wish everybody would do that. Right? So Moshe's, a little bit at least seems to have learned his lesson there. Okay, it's very complicated. It's like these like puzzle pieces, and they're all sort of echoing from each other, but they're all different. Does that answer your question?
It recognizes that there's some stuff going on.
Okay. All right. Okay, so let me just stop and see if there's anyone on Zoom that wants to speak. Oh my God. Real absence of speakers on Zoom today. It's shocking. It was shocking. Okay, we're gonna go on.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, sharing my screen. So let's go on with what happens in Deuteronomy, and now you hear more of the Jethro story than the Numbers story. Ashachai, if you will.
הבו לכם אנשים חכמים ונבונים ויודעים לשבטיכם ואשימם בראשיכם. Get yourselves men who are wise and clever and knowledgeable for your tribes or by your tribes, and I will place them over you.
So now it's all coming from Moshe. There's no Jethro. He's erased Jethro from the story. So I want to think with you, I'm not sure, how does that help Moshe in his agenda right now? Maybe because it's making it all about him and the people, right? And there's no intermediary. I don't know, something to think about.
He's internalized the voice of Yitro to the point where it is his own voice.
Nice.
And perhaps it has something to do with xenophobia, that they've just fought wars against foreigners who wanted to kill him. And he may be timid to say some of the best ideas come from foreigners, even though it would be a teaching moment that he missed.
Ah, okay.
Specifically Midianites.
Well, specifically Midianites, persons, yes. Okay, interesting point. Go on.
ותענו אותי ותאמרו, טוב הדבר אשר דיברת לעשות. And you replied to me and said, good idea that you've told us about. ויקח את ראשי שבטיכם, אנשים חכמים וידועים, ואתן אותם ראשים עליכם, שרי אלפים ושרי מאות ושרי חמישים ושרי עשרות, ושוטרים לשבטיכם. And I took from the heads of your tribes men who were wise and knowledgeable, and I placed them as heads over you, officers of thousands and officers of hundreds and officers of 50s and officers of 10s, and cops for your tribes. Va'asaved shoftechem ba'et hahi lemor, shamoa ben achechem ushvatertem tzedek ben ish uven achiv uven geiro. And I commanded your judges at that point, saying, listen between your brethren and adjudicate righteously between one and that person's fellow and the alien. Lo takiru fanim bamishpak, kakaton kagadol tishma'un. Lo taguru mipnei ish, ki amishpak lelohim hu. V'hadavar asher yikshe mikem tachrivun elai ushma'ativ. Do not recognize faces in judgment. The small and the great you shall listen to them equally. Don't be afraid of anyone, because justice belongs to Elohim. And whatever matter is too difficult for you, bring it to me and I will hear it. And I commanded you at that point regarding all of these things that you shall do.
Okay, so here you see some important values, right? Justice between whether it's a fellow Israelite or a stranger, not being partial in judgment, not, judgment not depending on whether someone has money or status or whatever, right? So I like that there's some values coming through. And again, these values are specifically important as they build a new society. Okay, so now let's go to the spy story. Okay, so now we're done with the resonances of I can't carry you by myself, and the burden, and the two stories that was based on. One was the Jethro story, and one was a story in Numbers, and one was a delegation in the legal sphere, and one was a delegation in the spiritual sphere, that carrying spirit, which is fascinating. But now let's see what happens with the spy story. So, all right, I'll just read a few verses. ותקרבון אליי כולכם ותאמרו נשלחה אנשים לפנינו ויחקרו לנו את הארץ. And all of you came to me and said, let us send agents ahead to reconnoiter, of that word, the land for us, and bring back word on the route we shall follow and the cities we shall come to. וישיבו אותנו דבר את הדרך אשר נעלה בה, את הערים אשר נבוא עליה. Okay, so that's how it's told in Deuteronomy, or that's how Moshe retells the story. And how is it presented in Numbers? Yidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, shalach lecha anashim v'yatru et eretz Canaan, asher ani noten b'nei Yisrael, ish echad, v'mateh avotav, tishalchu kol nasi bahem. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, send agents to scout the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelite people. Send one participant from each of their ancestral tribes, each one a chieftain among them. So Moses, by Adonai's command, sent them out from the wilderness of Paran, all of them being men of consequence, leaders of the Israelites. Did I read this one in Hebrew? Great. וישלח אותם השם ממדבר פרן, על כי אדוני כולם אנשים ראשי בני ישראל. So again, what's the crucial difference? What's going on here?
God is not in control. God is not making these suggestions. Moses is
So in Deuteronomy, Moshe presents it as an idea of the people, right? Of the people. And here in Numbers, right, it's Adonai spoke to Moses saying, Shalach lecha Hashem, send agents to scout the land of Canaan. Right. So now it could be that this part of the story precedes the story in Numbers, and Moshe is just filling in. It's like maybe the people came to Moshe and said, we really want the land. And God says, send spies to the land. I don't know. Whatever it is, they're really told differently. And Moshe here is making it as if it's coming from the people themselves. So again, he's giving the people a role in the story. Right? Part of growing up, I think, is that you find out, let's say you grow up with parents who really screwed up family, the whole thing, you feel completely like a victim. And then one day, after years of analysis, I had a role in the story. It takes you 40 years, but I had a role in the story. What was my role? What did I do? I'm not a complete victim here.
I think memory is very subjective.
Memory is very
subjective. And the same for history. We tell it convenient at one point to parse it one way and then the other, which is what we see all the time.
Yes, absolutely. Now, the reason I said the sea of remembrance, I saw recently, I forget, what was his name? Professor Schuster from Goucher College talked about the sea of history. And what do we raise up from the sea of history? And remembrance is the same thing. And the Torah is the same thing. There are infinite ways you could tell the story. There's infinite numbers of details you can raise up. And you can even contradict those details, right? So what gets raised up and why? You can always ask that question. What gets lifted up out of that sea? What am I lifting up from the sea of the Torah right now, right? What's my agenda? Okay, so I see, since no one else on Zoom wants to speak, I'm going to give Jay rights to a second telling.
Just very, very quick. I think there's another difference in the issue of raising. The whole gloss is really none of the drama, none of 10 spies being killed, none of the giants. And it's presented strictly as a pragmatic gloss. Like, what routes are we going to take? It's a done deal. We're crossing over, we're going. It's simply a matter of what routes are we going to take, which is an interesting raising up from that whole story.
Nice, thank you. Okay, so now I want to call in Nehemiah in a moment, but I want to present a bigger question. Given this theme of loneliness throughout, right? I'm wondering, is Moshe, and this is, I discussed this with my chavrita this morning, I think this came from her, we do chavrita sometimes, you don't remember. But, what comes from whom? If Sharon's here, she can tell. Is part of what Moshe doing here in his focus on the IU relationship and this sort of raising up of the people and peoplehood, is part of what Moshe doing is presenting or suggesting an antidote to loneliness. Maybe peoplehood itself, maybe our ability to say we and understand ourselves part of a larger enterprise is in itself at least somewhat of an antidote to loneliness. Right? When we go into Tisha B'Av, it's really challenging. We're mourning for 2 temples that were destroyed and a bunch of other Jewish calamities. We don't live in that time. We're actually facing the same challenge that Moshe faced when he's talking to these people that didn't go through these things. We didn't go through those things. So how do we mourn for things that we didn't even go through? And yet, many of us step into Tisha B'Av and fast and commemorate it. Listen to the Book of Lamentations and sit on the floor and the whole thing. I think it's a huge challenge. Okay, so I see, let me call on these people of us. Nehemiah and Jessica and Lori and Stewart. And okay, I'm going to ask everyone to be concise because now, of course, if people want to speak, we're near the end. And then, okay, Nehemiah.
Shabbat Shalom, Kehila Kdosha and Rabbi. I'm so happy that you brought Jethro here, that you chose to compare. As you know how much I love him. I love him almost as much as I love Moses. Jethro wasn't just a teacher. Jethro was a master of Moses. And there are people in the Druze who carry the tradition, and it's secret. And if God allow me for a book I want to write to reach as high as I can in this community, I would love to learn what they know of Jethro. And the same thing is true about Melchizedek. Abraham was not yet finished the last test of the sacrifice in Isaac, and he wasn't finished the item yet. And Melchizedek came to teach him something. And Melchizedek is worshipped by a certain sect that I know. So that's number one. That here, long before the Mefarshim, the interpreter in the Bible, already the intention to do away with Jethro. So it's very clear, and it's because he was not Jewish.
Yeah, I love the connection with Melchizedek and like the foreign leaders and Abraham and Melchizedek and then the high priest. That's really fascinating. And I'm going to ask you to wrap up now because there's a lot of other people.
I'm wrapping up with one sentence about being alone, which is, it's true, the needs of what is named Maslow. We need the community, therefore there are communities involved and we need to belong. But in order to reach the higher state, every human being, including the 3 masters that I know and including myself in the future, God willing, have to take a time to let go of all needs and to be alone in silence. So that's the exception for the need to be as a group. If you want to unite with the one, you have to let go of the others for a while.
Thank you, Nehemiah. And that's interesting because I think that connects to what we said before, that Moshe actually spent a lot of time alone on Har Sinai, right? On the top of Mount Sinai. And yet, as a leader, if you take everything on, then it's a curse to you and to the people that you're leading.
and 40 years before in the desert.
Go on, I'm gonna go on. Jessica. Thank you, Jessica.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom, and I didn't raise my hand before now because I have no voice.
Oh my God.
I just wanted to say one thing briefly, which has been really moving me throughout this teaching, is that there is a lot of shame in modern culture around loneliness. And somehow what I see now the Torah does for us is it normalizes our humanity in some way by talking about things that happened so long ago. And you know, I will fast and mourn not for the temple destruction necessarily, but for all the grief that my fellow Jews have felt over time. So I think there's something beautiful about not feeling shame for the things that we feel and lifting up loneliness and lifting up grief and not feeling embarrassed by a culture that is infused with toxic positivity, in my opinion. So.
Oh, Jessica, you nailed it. I love the Torah normalizes humanity, being human. It's beautiful, and also toxic positivity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, Lori and Stuart.
Hello, this is Lori and Stuart, and Lori Wilco's with us. I just want to thank you, Jessica. You know, in England, they have a Department of Loneliness now in the government. And I just want to say they do, because there is shame in this culture about loneliness. And I feel like we go to Hashem because it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart. But the missing piece in trauma, and the reason we have so much suicide, is because we go to God, we have to go to each other. We have to bear witness to each other's suffering, which Rabbi Diane, I say this every time, it's the same thing. I'm just saying it in different ways. The presence of witnessing pain, which is exactly why I told you guys that my license is going to be revoked. They want to revoke it because I was lonely. I got the message in December and I went into shame and fear and isolation and loneliness. And I said, I'm coming out of shame because I love touching people and I love my work, but I needed Hashem. And then I needed to reach out to you. And that's the missing piece of loneliness. When any one of us, if we share out of the shame, God will enter the space between us. And that's where the healing is, no matter what the trauma.
Thank you so much. And I love the way you illustrated what Jessica said. You know, coming to community means that you have to kind of let go of some of the shame and sort of just tell your story. So thank you, that was beautiful. Okay, Paul in the room.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I feel we have the privilege of, as people have said, lifting up our own sense of devastation and feeling bereft and alone. However, we have the advantage, I feel, I've always felt that Tisha B'Av is the precursor actually to Sukkot. And in between those events, we have Elul, we have this time of deep reflection, we have a celebration, we have a time of at-one-ment, and then we build our own sanctuary of redemption at Sukkot, which to me connects right back to the loss of temples.
Sitting in that flimsy house. The temples are also flimsy sacred houses. Right, beautiful, thank you. All right, we're gonna do one more text. Okay. So I thought this was really interesting. You have the source for this, we'll read the rest of it. Ellen Frankel. Would someone in the room like to read this? Mark.
Despite the fact that Deuteronomy is an ancient book, insights revealed in this book resonate with our modern ideas about human psychology. Contemporary psychologists describe the process known as countertransference, whereby a therapist projects onto her patients certain conflicts still unresolved within her own life history. Parents, too, can be guilty of such unconscious projection, describing to their children their own deep areas of disease. Therefore, we can read this first farewell speech as the presentation of a leader who engages in a kind of countertransference when he reflects back to the people what has transpired between him and them over the past 4 decades. Standing before the man on the threshold of death, he wonders, what happened to this people that I let out of slavery? What has happened to our shared resolve? What has happened to me, who is to serve as God's emissary and representative? Why have the people doomed me through their lack of faith, their ingratitude, their waywardness, to die without enjoying God's promise? We can see in Moses' flawed recollections and chastisements of the people a final attempt to reshape his life story so as to justify the past actions of this metaphoric parent.
So that's really interesting.
That's how I read the spy story in Deuteronomy, because I felt he was shifting the blame to people.
Yes, he was certainly shifting the blame to people.
And I felt that way.
There is a lot of blame. I would give Moshe a little bit more kafschut, a little bit more, how do you translate?
Credit.
What?
Credit.
Credit. Or
Benefit of the doubt.
benefit of the doubt. I think Moshe is speaking here from disappointment and anger. And I also think that he's trying to figure out how to impart the gift of a shared identity on the next generation who did not go through slavery and liberation. Right? I think it's a huge task. And I forgot to say, this is one of 3 long speeches. This is the first long speech in Deuteronomy. And as we go through the summer, all the way up to Rosh Hashanah, we will see how these speeches unfold and how some of the feelings of Moshe unfold as well. So with that, it is 9:45, and I want to bless us all as we enter Tisha B'Av, and I think this is Rosh Hashanah Day.
Oh my goodness, yes, it is.
Rosh Hashanah Day in a few days is Nagasaki Day. With all we're facing in our world, Hiroshima Day is today.
Hiroshima bombed, Trump the bomb.
It's all about facing destruction, facing human destruction, and I want to bless us with a sense of steadfastness and caring and nurturing and feeling cared for and nurtured despite all the fruits of destruction that we are facing in our world and the destruction that we are mourning on this day of Tisha B'Av. And don't forget, this is still Shabbat, so we're feeling the blessings and the nurturing of Shabbat and rest and renewal before Tisha B'Av. So Shabbat Shalom. I think we're passing the hostess to Ashkai. Is that right, Grace? And thank you, Grace, for moderating this Zoom session, and thank you for everybody for your insights and amplifying Torah today in this conversation, lifting it out of the sea of all nothingness, as Seth Cohen says that. E. Cummings, lifting it up from the sea of all nothingness.
Thank you, Rabbi Diane.
Yeah.
Thank you.